Good afternoon, teachers. Before starting the topic, I would like to ask some questions from you. Like, my hand is moving and I am walking on the stage. So, which organ is controlling these movements? Can anyone tell me?
Brain.
Yes, brain. Only brain is controlling our body movements, or is there any another organ also?
Nervous system. No spine.
That is a kind of a system, but I am asking organ. Spinal cord. Second organ is spinal cord. But what is spinal cord? Everyone know about brain that is present in the skull. But what is spinal cord? Where is it present? In the back, right? But where in the back? Is there a difference between vertebral column or spinal cord, or both are same?
I think the vertebral column is just sort of a protection for the spinal cord.
It's a kind of a
Protection.
It's a kind of a protection list.
Protects the spinal cord.
So whenever I ask these questions in most of the classrooms, students say they both are same. But think about the word spinal cord and other is vertebral column. Vertebral column means backbone. One is a bone and other one is a cord, right? So one is made up of bony structure that is made up of 33 bones, and a cord is running in between these bones. So that is spinal cord, and it is originating from a brain, back side of the brain. Okay? So we can say it is originating from the brain stem, and brain stem is made up of and medulla and pons. So that is medulla, also brain stem. So today we are going to discuss about what is nervous system and how messages are transmitted from one part of the body to the other part. So nervous system, what is nervous system? Nervous system means a system inside our body which controls and coordinates our body function. Now there are two words, control and coordinates. Control, we all know that it controls our body movements. But what is coordination? How brain and spinal cord helps in coordination? Yes. What is coordination? Yes, yes.
Maybe coordination
Okay. So let's take an example like I am eating. Now my stomach has to digest the food, right? So will it ask heart to, would you please stop functioning? I have to digest the food, or it would function simultaneously with the heart. Simultaneously, right? Or it would will it ask to other organs like lungs, would you please stop breathing? I have to digest the food which has just come inside me. No, they both work simultaneously, right? So that is called coordination. That coordination also occurs because of our brain and spinal cord. And brain and spinal cord are the part of nervous system. So nervous system basically means it controls and coordinates our body functioning. Now nervous system constitutes two parts, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system contains the brain and spinal cord. As we have already discussed, there are two major organs of our nervous system, brain and spinal cord, which control and coordinates our body parts or body movements. But how do the signals and the messages are transmitted from one part of the body to the other part? Through nerves. So that is included in the second system of nervous, that is peripheral nervous system. So peripheral nervous system contains all the nerves coming out from the central nervous system. It includes cranial nerves, that means the nerves originating from the brain, and second the spinal nerves, which are originating from the spinal. Anyone tell me how many spinal nerves and how many cranial nerves are there in our body? There is a number. We cannot say they are indefinite. There is a particular number. There are 12 pair of cranial nerves. 12 from this side and 12 from this side. That is reaching different body parts. Right? But what will be the, if brain is controlling all the body parts, then what is the need of spinal cord? Actually brain has a control of our upper body parts, or we can say till waist. But spinal cord contains the spinal nerves which are reaching the foot as well, the foot portion, the feet as well. That means going to the legs. You must have heard that in some accidents a person gets spinal injury and lower part gets paralyzed. Then why this happens? Because two backbones, okay, they push the nerves originating from the spinal cord. Okay? They just push the spinal cord, they push the nerves. So the messages coming from the spinal nerves will not reach the lower body part, so it gets paralyzed. Next slide please. So before moving further, we must know about three basic biological terms: stimulus, receptors and effectors. So there are three important terms that we should know before proceeding further. So stimulus, receptors and effectors. What is stimulus? Stimulus is a kind of a message, like when a bright light falls in our eye, what happens? What happens? What is our response?
We close our eyes.
Right? That is our response. But which thing produces this response? Which thing produces this response? I'm repeating again. When bright light falls in our eyes gets closed.
The spinal cord reflex action.
It's actually bright light which produces this response. It is because of the stimulus which reaches inside our eyes that evokes a kind of a response inside our body, which protect our eyes. So stimulus is anything in the environment or in the external environment which produces a response inside our body, a thing or an event that evokes a specific response. Anything, like whenever we touch a hot plate, our hand gets pulled back. That hot material, that is the stimulus, which produces the response inside our body. When we step on a sharp object, we immediately put our foot back. Okay, that is also because of stimulus. That stimulus is a sharp object. Now the second thing is receptor. Okay, before receptors, I want to ask, what are sense organs? What are sense organs? How many sense organs are there? Five sense organs. We all know there are five sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and
Skin.
But why we call this as a sense organ?
They help us to understand the outside world.
They help us to
It's through
understand.
them that we
So
understand.
what is present inside these sense organs which makes them so special? So there is something present inside these receptors. In sense organ, these are receptors which receive the stimulus from the outside environment. Right? So that's why we have five sense organs. Eyes, which sense the stimulus of light. That's why eyes contain photoreceptors. Next, what is the functioning of nose?
Smell.
So there are olfactory receptors which receives the stimulus of smell. Third, ears, auditory, that means it receives the stimulus of sound. The receptors are phonoreceptors. And the tongue, what is the function of tongue? Taste. Our tongue contains taste buds. Taste buds are kind of receptors. Those receptors are gustatory receptors. And skin, the largest organ in our body. Skin contains thermoreceptors which sense temperature or even touch. For touch there are thermoreceptors. For temperature there are thermoreceptors. Okay. So as I told you earlier, whenever we touch a hot object, we pull our hand back. So that is because of stimulus and receptors. Now the third, effector. What are effectors? We have received the stimulus from the outer environment, from the environment. It gets reached to the central nervous system. Now central nervous system will send some messages to specific parts to produce a response. Okay, everyone just curl your fingers like this. Everyone just curls your fingers like this. You will observe some of the muscles inside our skin, inner side of our skin, they are getting low. That means they are getting contracted. It can be seen clearly when we put some light on the skin. Okay, you must observe this thing that when we curl our fingers, the muscles will pull back. They get contracted. That means whenever we have to pull the fingers, when we have to curl the fingers, these are the effector organs. So brain has to send a message to this part to curl the fingers, not the fingers, to this part only. Likewise, when I have to move my forearm, whenever we have to move the forearm like this, the effector muscles are these. These muscles get contracted and pulls our forearm in this position. So these are the effector organs: stimulus, receptors, and effectors. These three biological terms we should learn before moving further for the learning of nervous system. So, can anyone tell me what is the functioning of olfactory receptors? What is the functioning of olfactory receptors? So, it sends smell. So, what are receptors? These are the group of organs or cells which receive the stimulus. Effector which produces response. Next slide. So, as I told you earlier that there are some nerves which helps in transmission of signals from one part of the body to the other part. So, what are those nerves? These nerves are made up of these nerve cells, or simply we can say neuron. Neurons are structural and functional unit of nervous system. That means all the structures are made up of neuron and all the functioning are performed by neuron. That means nerve cell. Like messages are transferred from receptor to brain and from brain to effector. That is transmitted through neurons. So what does this neuron consist of? It consists of a branching structure called dendrites. So what are dendrites? Dendrites receive signals from receptors or from the brain and transmit it to the central portion, that is a cell. This is a typical cell like animal cell which contains a nucleus, cytoplasm, but these cells contain more Golgi apparatus, that is a kind of apparatus which produces the signal, which helps in the transmission of signal. Now the next part is the longest part of the nerve cell, that is an axon. Now signals are transmitting from the dendrites to the cell body, that means the cell, and to axon. Now axon is a long fiber-like structure. It can be 1 meter long depending upon the location where they are present. And after axons there are some branching again that are axon endings or nerve endings. Now look carefully at the end of the axon. There are some button-like or knob-like structures. These are called synaptic knobs, axon terminals, or nerve endings. Axon terminals, synaptic knobs, or nerve endings. So these helps in the transmission of signal from one neuron to the next neuron. These are important ones. So messages are transmitted from dendrites. Dendrites receive the messages. Next cell body to axon, axon to nerve endings or axon terminals. So next. So what are neurons? As I told you, neurons are the structural and functional unit of nervous system. That means nervous system is made up of neurons and all the functioning of our nervous system is because of it. That means structural unit and functional unit. It is forming the structure as well as performing the function. But depending upon the location, there are three types. Depending upon the function as well. Sensory neuron and motor neuron and relay neuron. But the important ones are sensory and motor. Now think about sense organ. Sense organ, sensory neuron. That means whenever the message has to be transmitted from the sense organ, like from skin to the brain or to the spinal cord, that is transmitted through sensory neuron. That means from sense organs to central nervous system. Central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord, right? So from sensory neurons are the neurons which carry messages, which transmit messages from receptors or from the sense organs to the central nervous system. Now, what happens in the central nervous system? Brain and spinal cord. What function they perform? What function they perform? They just process the signal. First of all, they process the signal. Like what kind of signal is coming from the sense organ? And after that, they send back a particular signal to effector organ. Like now, motor neuron. From central nervous system, spinal cord and brain, messages are transmitted to the effector organ, to pull our hand back, to close our eyes, right? These messages are transmitted through motor neurons. These are motor neurons. Sensory neurons transmit signals from sense organs to the brain, and motor neurons from brain to effector organs, right? So this is a pathway of nerve impulse, how the messages get transmitted from one part to the other part and come back to the effector organ. First of all, it's a stimulus, like it's a cactus. When we touch the cactus, our skin contains thigmoreceptors and thermoreceptors. Thigmoreceptors get activated and a sensory neuron catches a signal from the receptors, that means from the skin, and transmits message to the spinal cord. Now, which organ is near to the hand? our brain or spinal cord. Spinal cord, we can say. So in this kind of action, like whenever we touch a spiny object or a sharp object, we just have to pull our hand immediately, right, to prevent any damage or injury. So in this case, our spinal cord plays a major role. So from sense organ, messages are transmitted to the spinal cord, so through sensory neuron, and processing of message takes place in the spinal cord. After that, spinal cord sends message back to the effector organ. Like I told you, when I have to pull my hand back, forearm back, these are the effector organs, not these ones. These are the effector organs. These muscles get contracted and pull the forearm back. Now, there are different kinds of processes occurs inside the body. Like we perform some function voluntarily, and others occurs without our will. Okay. So, I would like to show the reaction time of the response by doing a small activity. I would like to call Arshdeep sir on stage. Please, sir. So I'm going to show the reaction time. Like when my sense organ receives a stimulus and then it goes to my brain, and my brain sends back the signals to the effector organ. So it takes some time, right? So that is the reaction time. Now I am holding this scale. Arshdeep sir has to catch this scale. You have to stand in this position. So when I am holding this scale, now I am going to drop it down. Now we will see if Arshdeep sir will catch the scale from this portion or from this portion, or it will fall. Okay. So Arshdeep sir's reaction time is this much only. Okay. First of all, Arshdeep sir noted down the stimulus was received by the eyes. Then it got sent to the brain. Then brain sent back messages to the effector organ. Then Arshdeep sir catches the scale. That is the reaction time. It takes a fraction of seconds, but there are some other actions also which do not require this much time. That has to be happen with a fraction of second. Otherwise, we may get injured. We may get some injury or any kind of thing, like
Blink of eye.
yes, blinking of eye. Like I told you, when bright light falls in our eye, we have to close our eye immediately. If we start thinking that a bright light falls in our eye, we have to stop. We have to close our eye. No, it will damage our cornea. It will damage our retina. So that response, that kind of actions require immediate response. These kind of actions are known as reflex actions. These kind of actions are reflex actions, which are sudden and are not under our control, but under the control of spine. So the next thing, and the important one, what do you think? A single neuron is connected from the sense organ to the brain, or there are multiple neurons joined end to end? There are multiple neurons. But the important and the unique thing is they are not joined completely. There is a gap between two neurons. There is a gap between two neurons. And that gap is known as synapse. This one is a synapse. So how do the messages get transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron? As I told you, the important part of the axon is their axon terminals, a synaptic node, a node-like structure. So this is the microscopic structure of a synaptic node. And what is this? This is a dendrite. That means the next neuron, the starting of the next neuron. As I told you earlier, messages get transmitted from the dendrite to the cell body, then axon to the nerve end. So first of all, messages get transmitted from dendrites to cell body, then axon, then nerve endings. Now it has to jump to next neuron. That means next neuron's dendrite is facing the axon terminal of first neuron. So how do this transmission of signals occurs? Let me tell you one thing: the signals, the messages inside our body travels in the form of electrical impulses. In the form of electrical signals, those are known as nerve impulses. So first, whenever a signal reaches the nerve endings, there is an action potential. There is a response in the nerve ending which makes it permeable. Permeable means it can absorb more calcium ions. Now here is the function of calcium ion. Why calcium is required in our body? It is not only required for the bones too, it is also required for the transmission of signals. Right? So when the message reaches over here, calcium ion present in the interstitial fluid of the neuron enters inside the nerve ending of the first nerve. It activates these sac-like structures. Now, what are these sac-like structures? First of all, I told you calcium ions enter inside the nerve ending and activate these sac-like structures. These sac-like structures contain some chemicals. These chemicals are known as neurotransmitters. These chemicals are neurotransmitters. Examples of these neurotransmitters are like acetylcholine, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which helps in the transmission of signal from the one neuron to the next one. So, I'm explaining again. Calcium ions gets absorbed by the nerve ending of the first neuron, and these sac-like structure which contain neurotransmitter gets activated. Now, the second step is they get fused with the membrane of axon terminal. Now, this membrane is known as presynaptic membrane. Why we are calling it as presynaptic? This portion is known as synapse. This is coming before synapse. That's why it is known as presynaptic. Now, the second membrane is coming after synapse. That is known as postsynaptic. So, what happens? These neurotransmitters and the sac-like structures get fused with the presynaptic membrane and release the neurotransmitter, that means acetylcholine, in the synapse. Now, there are some receptors. The postsynaptic membranes contain some receptors like ball-like structures which catch the neurotransmitters. Whenever they catch the neurotransmitters, same electrical impulse which were there in the last neuron start in the next neuron. So that is how message get transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron. Now this process occurs in a fraction of second. This process occurs in a fraction of second. We can say 1/10 of the second. Right? So next process. So this is the whole procedure or the mechanism how the transmission of signal occurs inside a body from one neuron to the next neuron. That is called synapses. And the gap between the two neurons is called synapse. First of all, synthesis of neurotransmitters in the presynaptic membrane, that means in the sac-like structure. Then storage of neurotransmitter in the secretory cycle, regulated release of neurotransmitter in the synaptic space between the pre and the postsynaptic membrane, that means in the synaptic cleft, in the synapse. Then these are received by the receptors present in the postsynaptic membrane. So in this way, messages get transferred to the next neuron. So that's it.
How does it help everybody to keep their brain active and strong? So that was the main point, right?
Basically,
They
when-
need to understand that if you learn some skill or the other, it's not what we learned in our colleges and universities is enough. You know, link the synaptic connection of
Basically,
neurons
when-
and axon terminal to how important it is for everybody to learn something new.
Alright. So whenever we have to perform more function, we are given some functions, we have to use our brain. If we are talking about our brain, we have to use our nerves, that means the neurons. That means we have to use more neurotransmitters. So basically, if we are using more brain, more neurotransmitters are produced inside the presynaptic membranes, and more quickly will be the message transmitted to the next neuron. So if we are not using our brain, if we are not given some work, the production of these neurotransmitters goes down. And time by time, it got diminished. So the part of our brain gets dull, or we cannot sense anything, right? So that is how synapses or synaptic membrane is related to the transmission of signals.
Even talk about the skills they already have, if they don't use, how they lose it, how does it connect to the brain and the nervous system?
Actually, that is a part of the memory that is in the cerebrum. So cerebrum contains some neurotransmitter for certain skills, right? They are already present inside the cerebral portions. If you are not using that cerebral portion,
Tell them about hippocampus, amygdala, so that they understand how important. They just come and learn whatever learned in the school and college time. They think that is enough. They're harming their brains as well, not only children.
so basically what is happening, there are some centers inside our brain, the hunger center, sorrow center, and a center which makes us happy. And there is a memory portion in the cerebral hemisphere or the cerebrum, the largest portion of our brain, which contains neurotransmitter which is already present inside the brain. If we are not using that neurotransmitter, they goes down, they got diminished. So we need to work on that skill to generate more neurotransmitters like that, which were previously present inside our brain. So we can enhance our skill which is already present inside our body. So that is what we need to work more. We need to enhance our skills to develop more neurotransmitters, to transmit signals quickly, and we have to take care of diet as well, because calcium is required for the transmission of signals.
Brilliant. Brilliant is the word. Well done.